Yo, what is up, my Attaway Audio All-Stars? Today, I'm going to be going over 5 tips that you can use for training new sound techs that want to join the sound team. Now, I know the big problem is always, how do I get more people to sign up to be part of the sound team? And if you're a solo sound tech, and you're the only person doing it, eventually you're going to have to train somebody else. If you're a worship leader, and you're trying to recruit on the sound team, you have to be able to train them. You don't always have somebody else that can do that for you. So today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks in this live stream on how to incorporate a new person and make it so that it's easy for them to catch on and stay on. Because if you train them and they leave, then you've wasted a whole lot of time and you're back where you started. So this is going to help keep people going, and it's what I do when I'm training new people on a worship team. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe and ding the little bell to get notified every time I'm posting a new video or going live like this. I'm posting stuff to help you make every worship mix an enjoyable one, because it's really important that people are paying attention to Jesus. They're not paying attention to the sound distractions. So that's the stuff that I'm going over here to make your team work well, to make your sound gear work well, and to pull off great mixes and experience the joy of mixing while you're running sound at church. Go ahead and drop your name. Well, your name is in your handle or whatever, but tell me where you're watching from and how long you've been serving on the sound team in the chat box below, or you can drop it down in the comments below if you're watching the replay. Hey, we've got some people jumping on the chat already. You can drop your chats there. I'll be taking time to answer some questions as we go, but I'm going to try to get to this so that we can get through it and you can get on with your day. Tip number 1 for onboarding a new sound tech is find out what they know. You don't want to be like grabbing a microphone. Let me grab a microphone. My microphone's all disappeared. So you grab a microphone and you're like, this is the business end of a microphone. And they're like, yeah, I've mixed, Grammy Award winning records. And so then you look kind of foolish because you're like, oh, I'm trying to teach you the very basics, but you already know what you probably know more than me, right? You have to figure out and kind of size up what is it that they know and what is it that they don't know. Because you don't want to talk down to them like, you're new here, so you're totally gonna flop and I've got to teach you every little baby step, but maybe they've got 10 years of experience. They're just not familiar with your system or your console or your stage setup. So find out what they know first and just ask them questions. The other thing that's going to do for you is that the stronger your relationship is, beyond just a what can you do for me kind of relationship, the stronger that bond is going to be when they get busy, when stuff comes up, when they're tempted to quit. That bond is going to keep them on the worship team. So asking them what they know and what their experience is like is super, super helpful. So that's tip number 1. Find out what they know. One way to do that, which is this step number 2? No, this is still step number 1. Listen to music together. I can't express this enough. So many problems that we have on our church worship teams with the difference of opinion on what it should sound like is just because we're aiming at different targets. And sometimes people don't even know what the target is. There's this thing that happens when you're standing in front of the soundboard for the first time. I call it the console fog, right? You see all the controls in front of you. You know kind of what the stuff does. And when you weren't in front of the soundboard, you knew exactly what to do. But then you're standing there and all the controls are there and you're like, what do I do, right? If you don't have a crystal clear idea of what it should sound like, what does a good kick drum sound like? What does a good bass level sound like? What do great sounding vocals sound like? If you can't identify those in your mind before you step up to the mixer, you're going to have a much harder time trying to move the faders and the EQ and the compression to get there. So listening to music together is a huge benefit so that everybody's got a great idea of what kind of music and what kind of balance and what kind of tones are going to help our people sing. And so you're not just listening to music for like, hey, I like this music. You're listening to music and calling out like, hey, I really love the way that this guitar sounds on this song. Let's see if we can get our guitars to sound more like that. We're not going to match it because we don't have the thousands of dollars worth of gear and the A-list player that totally nailed that part. but we're going to go that direction, or this is what we're wanting to achieve. And you don't have to get 100% success to get there, but knowing what the target is and where you're going is going to help you get new people on. And they're going to go, okay, this is what we're going for. It's not just like I have to come up with something out of the blue and understand what I'm trying to do when I'm running sound. You've made it really clear. This is the role that the acoustic guitar plays in this song. And this is the role that the piano plays in this song. That way you don't have things that are way out of balance because you just had a difference of opinion. Listening to music can kind of normalize those different types of things. So you can listen to the recordings of the songs that you're playing on Sunday. You can listen to other recordings and you're like, hey, I really like the way this feels. I know we're not going to go there, but that's my preference and that's what I like. Being able to identify the difference between what you like and what's going to serve the congregation is another benefit of listening to music together with your new sound trainee. Wow, we got lots of people in the comments today. Audio is ahead of video, but hey, stuff happens. Hey, thanks for the heads up, Daniel. Let me throw a delay on here really quick. Live streaming is always tricky. So, hang on. Advanced audio properties. Hey, if you're using OBS for your church's live stream, go ahead and tell me in the comments below, because that's what I'm using right now. I'm going to guess that we're at 300 milliseconds. All right, so I just delayed my audio a little bit. Hopefully it's lining up better with the video. And let me clap to see if it's really working. All right, so I'll be able to tell in post, and hey, there's a little pro tip for you. If you're having audio-video sync issues for your live stream, that's a freebie for you. Download the video after you stream it, see how many frames off that is, and then you can get that lined up and ready to go. All right, so 3 frames. That was good to know. Very cool. I did 10 frames, so maybe I'm off. Anyway, maybe now my audio is behind the video. We'll see. So, tip number 2 for onboarding a new sound tech is teach them the stage setup. Now, there's a few different reasons that we start people off on stage. The first one is that you get to introduce them to the band because there's this invisible wall in between the sound booth and the stage that unless you actually just walk up there and talk to the band, you don't feel like you're a part of the worship team. But the reality is you are part of the worship team on the sound team, even though you're serving in a different part of the room. The mix vastly affects the way that the playing on stage encounters the people in the room. And so it's a critical link that the sound tech and the soundboard is between the worship team and the room. So you need to make that relational connect. And so going up on stage, introducing yourself, saying, hey, if you need anything, I'm here to help. Again, it's forging those strong relationships. People on the sound team are more likely to keep serving if they're friends with people on the worship team too. We crave connecting with other people, especially say you were working a 9 to 5 or you're working during the week and you don't have a lot of other believers around. If that's one of the only times where you're around another group of believers, aside from maybe your small group, that is something that is so valuable to connect on the worship team. So always have your sound techs learn to set up the stage so that they're around the worship team. And also then they know how to troubleshoot stuff. They know where your stuff is plugged in. They know how your stuff is labeled. Even if they've got a ton of experience, they can get acclimated both relationally and functionally with the sound team. All right. We got our sync issues figured out. Thank you guys for giving me the heads up on that. Tip number 3. So we've got to identify our instruments and their relationships. Now, this is another place where it's helpful to know where somebody started because I've trained some sound techs where they didn't even know what the different drums were. Like they didn't know the difference between a tom and a snare. And they knew that the big drum on the ground was bassier, but they didn't know what was called the kick drum. They didn't know the difference between the ride cymbal over here and the hi-hat over here, right? So sometimes you've got to gauge, does this person understand all the different instruments? You can't always assume. And then once you do, you can talk about their role. Now, the first thing you've got to do is, well, the way that I was trained back in like ninth grade, was you look around at the stage and you think, can I hear that? Can I hear that? Can I hear that? And that's kind of your like mental checklist. Like, is this mix balanced or is everything audible? That is huge and super helpful. The next step of that, and depending on where they're starting, you might go on to this next step, is talk about what the values are for your church and the way that you want the mix presented. Basically, the level relationships or the emphasis that you place on different instruments in your mix. So we can talk about cultural differences here. If you're going to a black church or a church that has gospel music, the drums are going to need to be louder than if you're at a white evangelical church or a Baptist church or whatever. There are things that are important to your church that help your people sing. So you have to identify that and say, hey, this is a critical element. And a lot of times you can find those things where it's like, yeah, we just kind of understand that. It's kind of like it's in the water. We just kind of culturally get that. That's the way that it's always been. And so we're trying to match that. But it's helpful to call it out and make it clear, right? The clearer that you are with what your expectations are, the easier it is to align your sound text, especially your new ones, to those expectations. That way you don't get in a fight over like, well, I like it this way. Well, I like it this way. Well, my preference is this. I want it to sound like a metal band, but it should all sound like Bethel and Hillsong. That's atrocious. And even though we might not say those things out loud, those things like kind of go under the surface. If we don't call it out and just say, hey, in our mix, we want to have big drums, but we want to have the vocals on top and we want to have the guitars and keyboards supporting the vocals. They don't come out in front unless they're doing a solo or they're the primary instrument, like a synth part that's like, needs to be out in front and like up there with the melody. If you can make those things clear, it's way easier to teach people to mix because they can say, oh, this is the value. You're not attacking me or the way that I mix, right? Because I'm going off on a little bunny trail here, so bear with me. Sound techs are a weird combination of technical people and musical people. So this is going back to the find out what they know. Sometimes you get somebody that's a tech, right? They program computers for a living and they love IT, so they're not scared of the digital console and they walk up, but the only thing that they play is the radio. You might also get like a guitar player. A lot of guitar players and drummers end up making great candidates for sound techs. That they know all the music stuff. They know exactly how the music should sound, but they don't know how to get the technical stuff. Like, how does this EQ or compressor actually work to get me to what I want it to do? And so they usually end up getting the faders exactly in the right spot, but the rest of the tools, they're not quite so clear on what to do with. So in being a creative person, right? Even if you're a technical person, you're still a creative person and you take pride in what you create and what you're doing when you're running sound. Because like if the person doesn't care, right, they shouldn't be there in the first place, right? So if you're having to correct them, it's probably on something that they care about already. So that can sting and feel like a personal attack, even if it's not, unless you totally remove it and you're like, look, this is the ideal that we're going for. This is what you're giving us. We want to move it this way because this is what makes our people sing and engage with the worship songs so that they can engage their bodies, their heart, their soul, their spirit in worshiping Jesus. That's what we're going for, and that's why this is important, and that's why we want you to make this change. If you don't have that really clear and really laid out clear for you, I've got a guide for you called How to Lead Your Church Sound Team. It's free. There's a link down in the description below. You can download it. It's a short ebook, but then I unpack a little bit more of it in a series of emails afterwards. It's been super helpful for a lot of people to understand what it is that you're trying to aim for or get it really clear on what it is that you're aiming for with your sound team. So that it's not confusing anymore. I lay out all the things that you need to fill in the blanks, essentially, of, how much of this do we have and how much of that do we have. if you get it clear, it's really, really easy to run hard and to bring other people with you. So that's my little spiel for that. You've got the link down in the description below. You'll really enjoy that. A lot of people have already. So all that to say, we're talking about the level relationships of our different things, right? This is another thing that you can do when you're listening to music. You can identify and call out, be like, hey, listen to how the snare is like way out in front. But the cymbals, even though they're crashing, they're a little bit lower in the mix. They're a little bit more tucked back. Those are the kinds of things that as they are listening, they can then identify and make that change happen on the console. Let's see. All right. So, number one, we figured out what they know, and we've listened to music together. Number two, we've taught them the setup, right? How to set up on stage, get them introduced to the worship team. Hopefully they become friends. If they don't have people skills, teach them some people skills. I've worked with a lot of people who are just awkward, and they just need a little bit of help doing that. You don't know what their background's like. You don't know what their, growing up's like. Sometimes they just need a little bit of advice on how to talk to people the right way. And I didn't talk about this much yet, and it wasn't in my notes, but it takes a whole lot of people skills to run sound and do it well, because you got to give feedback to your team. So that's another thing to think about. Make sure that you're investing in people, in their people skills and their ability to confront or talk to people about stuff that needs fixing. Those are huge, huge skills that will take you a long way. And people don't like working with great sound techs just because they make stuff sound good. They like working with great sound techs because they make them feel good as well. So there's another little nugget for you. My ADD is kicking in. I got to show you this shirt. Check this out. Woo! That's what I do. I mix music and I know things. My friend Terry gave that to me. She is a wonderful Bible teacher, musician, music teacher. You can check her out at Worship-Matters here on YouTube. I helped her get her, stuff set up for her filming setup, and she bought me this t-shirt because it was awesome. Even though I don't like cats, this shirt is still awesome. Okay, rabbit trail's done. Number 4. How do you actually get them to do it by themselves, right? If you're like a lot of sound techs that I know, you might be a little bit of a control freak. If you're a control freak, go ahead and type control freak down in the comments below. I can sympathize. I like it to be perfect. But you're going to have to get to the point where it's not perfect, and you're going to have to get to the point where you can hand it off to somebody else, because perfection is, your mixes aren't that great. I mean, they're great, but you're not that great that everything's going to fall apart and everybody's going to leave the church if you hand it off to somebody else and they don't crush it like you do every time. Okay, sorry, rant over. So, number 4, this is the process by which you hand it off, okay? So, if you want to write it down, you can write this down. Number 1, you mix, they watch, right? This is great when you describe what you do while you're doing it, right? If you can take your internal monologue and let it out, that's really helpful so they can know what you're doing. You're not going to be able to teach them all the nitty gritty of like why EQ does this and why the mathematical function of Q on your bandwidth control, you're not going to teach them that, but just kind of like walk them through what you're doing while you're doing it. Then they mix, you tell them what to do. So you say, okay, let's push up the vocal a little bit more so that it doesn't get buried. Okay, let's pull back the vocal a little bit because it's getting a little too far out in front and we're losing the energy for the band, but people are getting mowed down in the first row, right? They mix, but you tell them what to do, and you tell them that you're going to tell them what to do. Say like, hey, I want your hands to be on the faders, but I'm going to like think my brain through my mouth and tell you what to do, and then you get to be my hands and fingers and knob turners, right? So that's step number 2 for getting them alongside it. They're doing what you tell them to do, and then you can see how quickly they go along. And then you're also looking for 2 attributes here. You're looking for them to be teachable, because if they can't follow the directions, they're not going to love being on the sound team, because you have to follow directions. You have to be able to take correction. You're never going to be perfect and on all the time. And then once you are perfect and on all the time, the musical style is going to change and something else is going to come in, and that thing that worked now isn't going to work in the future. Just go back to the 80s and think about the way that we engineered then. The sounds are much different, right? So you're going to have to be adaptable and teachable. So you're looking for them to be teachable, you're looking for them to be humble, and you're looking for them to be hungry. You want to check and see if they're asking you questions while you're telling them what to do. Because if they're not hungry, they're not going to keep growing, and you want to encourage that on your team, right? You want hungry people that are going to be self-motivated to grow and to take online courses and to watch YouTube videos, kind of like you're doing right now, right? You want to find those other people that have that hunger to grow, and you want that to be contagious, right? It's not just going to happen on accident. They're going to have to take that on for themselves. So that's what you're watching for while they mix, but you tell them what to do. Step 3 is they mix, you watch, and you give feedback, right? So this is giving them more control and stepping back more on your end. So you might be in the sound booth, but you're not telling them what every single thing they should do. By this point, they should know the habits and the rhythms and the routines so that they can understand what to do, and they're going through the motions. You can give feedback, but keep it sparse, right? You don't want to necessarily give less or no feedback. You just want to give it at the right time, right? So as you're going, you're still always giving feedback. Like, hey, I liked what you did, with that acoustic guitar. I wouldn't have gone about it that way, but it ended up feeling really good in the mix, right? You can appreciate their own take on stuff. You can appreciate the differences. And that point, you're kind of letting them fly out of the nest a little bit, but you're still around, right? If they have questions, if they get in a pinch, if there's a sound tech solo and something starts squealing and they get lost, deer in the headlights, you can run over and turn that one knob and notch out that frequency, whatever you need to do, right? They're not high and dry. There's no safety net, but they're mixing pretty much. And you're helping guide them and, figure out what's right. The next step is to really hand them off and let them be on their own, but on their own doesn't mean no feedback. When you're in this 4th stage of teaching them to mix and letting them go out on their own, the feedback never stops, right? You're always improving and you're wanting it to always improve. So your feedback comes after the set, and it starts with this question. Hey, what'd you like about your mix today? What went well? That starts them thinking about the things that they did well and their wins. And that puts them in a frame of reference of, hey, things are going good. There's lots of different personality types, but if you're familiar with the disc or the lion otter, beaver, golden retriever, if you're a beaver, or if you're a very detail-oriented person, those people can tend to also be melancholy and go into the depths of despair. So, that can be really, really bad if you're like, I had a bad mix today, and I don't know why, and nothing's going right, and everything's awful, but they won't cry, because they won't show you that. They'll probably keep it well hidden. But that's might be going on internally if you come out and we're like, well, this stunk, and this stunk, and this stunk, and you got to fix this, man, that was terrible, right? Start off that way, and you're bound to shut somebody down, and it's over, right? They're not going to receive more from you if they're offended, right? Proverbs says that it's easier to overtake a city with walls than to win a brother offended. Because the Bible doesn't say this, but you can hire an army to besiege a city with walls. But there is no army that you can hire or no amount of money that you can pay to get somebody that's offended with you to not be offended, right? They have to choose to let down that wall. So be really careful in the way that you give feedback when you're giving feedback to people after they've mixed. So starting off with, hey, what went well today? That sets the tone for them thinking about their wins. And then you can respond with, yeah, I really loved the way that the vocal sounded. Or you got the harmony parts really right up there with the melody, and that balance was perfect. I looked around the room and I saw people worshiping all over it. It was great. Then you can say, hey, what do you think you need to improve for next time? Or what do you think could have gone better? This puts the ball in their court, and this also helps them be the one to decide, I'm going to grow, right? You're setting themselves up. You're kind of giving them the the softball slow pitch, right? Here, what can you do better? Oh yeah, what can I do better? That sets them on the path to growth. And those are the kinds of people that you want on your sound team, right? So that's the kind of feedback that you're giving when they're mixing on their own. It's asking questions. It's inviting them to discover what went well and what didn't. And then at the end of that, you can be like, yeah, we got some complaints over on, right beside the subs that the kick drum was like throbbing right there. And I know it's, right beside the subs, but maybe we can dial back a little bit on the low end so we're not like, hitting the brown note for people. And at that point, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that, right? So the way that you have that built, the process that you go through to give feedback, and the relational capital that you've built, because remember, you asked them what they knew a while ago. You've been getting to know them more, and you've got some level of trust built between you. You can drive over that bridge with more weighty things when you've got all those things set up. So that's really, really helpful. Yeah, we got some control freaks in the comments. Let's see. Let's see, what, number 5, all right? Number 5. I already gave you number 5, but here we go, number 5, woo! Teachability and humility and hunger to grow. Those are the 3 things that you're looking for to cultivate. We already talked about it because it's just part of my process, but that's what you've got to do when you're not just onboarding someone new, but the way that you're keeping them on your team, right? They've got to they've got to be able to receive feedback. They've got to be able to be humble and not, have the pride of like, I'm the best ever. And they've got to have hunger to grow, right? So if you've got somebody that has more hunger to grow than you have ability to teach them, say you are a worship leader and you've got a sound team, or you're a tech leader, but you don't know how to explain the stuff that you do really well. Later this week, I'm going to be opening up registration for my courses. I've got 3 courses that are coming out. Mixing Foundations, right? That's for the beginners. Step by step, very simple. It fills in all the gaps that maybe you didn't learn when you got onboarded the first time. You might have gotten thrown in the deep end and be like, well, here's the stuff. Here's how to turn it on, figure it out, right? So Mixing Foundations is great for beginners. It's great if English is your second language. I try not to talk too fast, but I've got explanations, I've got demonstrations, and then I've got homework assignments for you to try the stuff after you watch the videos. So they're concise videos. I don't go on and on for hours, but it's basics so that you can get a firm foundation to build upon so that you understand what's going on with your sound system and all the tools. I've got a broadcast mixing course, which I released back in May, but I'm making updates and improving that. That will be coming out. And then my flagship course is Amateur to Pro. So the things that all the professionals know that inform all their decisions, that keeps them from making amateur mistakes, I lay it out in this class. This is pretty much a complete course on your sound system so that you can touch a little bit. I don't go in depth in each area of your sound system, like wireless, system tuning, your console. I go pretty deep into the console because that's helpful. But it gets you enough so that you can interface with professionals when they come to install stuff at your church. You can know exactly what you need to solve the problems that you're running into when it was kind of mysterious before, and you're shopping on Sweetwater and you're like, oh, I think I need this processor, but not really sure. Maybe it'll work because it's got great reviews, right? You can know whether or not those new gear purchases are really going to work for you. And then you can have the understanding that informs people on like how we set up the stuff that we set up, right? One example is like the difference between the way that low frequencies and high frequencies behave, right? So if you're setting up your speaker system and somebody says, hey, it's really muffled over on this side, I can't really understand. Well, there's level over there. I went over there and I could hear sound. You can understand that those high frequencies are more directional and those low frequencies are less directional, so they'll go everywhere. And so then you need to point your speakers in a different direction. If you need tools for pointing your speakers in a different direction, I show you how to use SMART using a a reference microphone or any other microphone that you want so that you can know if your seating area really is covered well. You can learn how to add EQ or apply EQ changes to your speakers to make them more even or take out resonances in your room. There's a whole lot that I go over in these courses. It's pretty much a complete audio course, right? If I was going to teach a semester at a university, which I've done at the post-secondary level before at a ministry school, that's pretty much everything that I would put into a semester-long course that you get for a fraction of the cost because we don't have to have a room, we don't have to get together. You can do it on your time and you can do it whenever you're ready for it. You can go to any of the lessons anytime and you get lifetime access. So if you want to find more information, you can join my email list. I'm going to be sending out more information about those courses coming out soon. I'm putting all the finishing touches on the website to tell you all the details. So if you have questions, they will be found there. You can always email me, james@adawayaudio.com. If you want information or if you want to get put on the list, you can definitely let me know that way. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit subscribe, ding the little bell so that you get notified about all these awesome live videos that I'm doing. And I'm here to help you make every worship mix an enjoyable one. You're serving God in the trenches, on the front lines. You are the heroes of this story, and I'm here to help you do that. I can't be in every single one of your churches around the world mixing and making great audio, but I can tell you how to do it. So thanks for tuning in. Check out Worship-Matters, Dr. Terry, if you like hearing about how to interpret the Bible through the way that Jewish people thought, because many of the people that wrote the Bible were Jewish, including Jesus. So if you want to do that, check out her channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Super pumped to have you here. If you're watching in the replay, go ahead and comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see. I'm getting ready to make another batch of videos to make for you guys. And I would love to hear from you on that. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.